Hi, I'm Anastacia Davies, and this is what you need to know about renewable fuel. Renewable fuels, in their simplest term, are any typical fuel that you use for powering cars or aircraft or ships. But instead of coming from a fossil fuel like crude oil, they come from a biofuel, or a replenishable renewable feedstock. One of the most exciting pieces about renewable fuels is that they work exactly like conventional fuel. So if you think about traditional biofuels, things like ethanol and biodiesel that you might be familiar with, those are similar to diesel and gasoline, but they're not identical, which means you could blend them to a certain point, but after that you might have performance issues. Renewable fuels, renewable diesel or renewable gasoline, on the other hand, are basically identically molecular to their fossil counterparts, which means you could blend them one for one into the fuel stream without seeing any adverse effects. So renewable fuel is particularly useful as a tool to decarbonize really hard to abate sectors. And probably the poster child for that is the aviation industry. Because if you think about airlines and flying, there's a ton of emissions associated with it, and it's all from burning jet fuel. And it's hard to fly without burning jet fuel. So that's where renewable fuels can come in. If you take sustainable aviation fuel, which is the term used for renewable jet fuel, you can, as I said, blend it in one for one as it's available. And that's a way to shift the aviation industry away from fossil jet fuel without having to change out our planes and our fueling equipment and everything else, all the infrastructure around it. A lot of governments are trying to help spur the adoption of renewable fuels, and particularly sustainable aviation fuel. And we've seen a lot of different types of policies being adopted. A lot of governments are taking different approaches to this. In the US, we see a very carrot-based or incentive-based approach through things like the Inflation Reduction Act Sustainable Aviation Fuel Tax Credit. In Europe, on the other hand, they're doing much more of the mandate heavy-handed approach, where they say we want to see a certain amount of sustainable aviation fuel in the jet fuel stream, and they ramp it up over time. Looking at the long term, I'm quite optimistic when it comes to the adoption of sustainable aviation fuel and renewable fuels, because they really do have this ability to help sectors reach decarbonization targets that they don't otherwise have other options to do. We're starting from a very, very low target. At the moment, less than 1% of jet fuel is sustainable aviation fuel in the market today. And so that has the potential to grow, but growing at such a scale over a quick time period in order to reach 2030 or 2050 targets is going to be a really big feat for the energy market today. Thank you for watching. I'm Anastacia Davies, and this was what you need to know about renewable fuels.